Resident Evil 7 certainly was a strange case, but it worked out for the better as Resident Evil 7 seems to have turned the entire series around from heading directly into a brick wall. Why am I mentioning Resident Evil 7 right now? Well, because these two games have a lot of similarities, and believe it or not, when Resident Evil 7 was first announced, a lot of people called it a ripoff of Outlast, just because of the first-person perspective alone. However, I digress, and disagree. I don't think that Resident Evil 7 and Outlast are the same thing. Outlast is much scarier.
Everything I touch curdles up and turns into mold. Blacklisted and failing. I'll never change up the life that I'm living. I am the infamy. I run with the wolves of the wicked.
Let's take a trip back to 2013, when Halloween was right around the corner and the perfect horror experience created by an indie team of devs eager to scare the hell out of anyone willing to step up to their challenge was the main conversational piece for weeks in the gaming community. I am of course talking about Outlast, a game that had previously been released as a PC exclusive, but due to worldwide popularity, the game had spread its wings and flew into other areas like the PlayStation and Xbox. It stands as a staple forever embedded in the packet of horror games. It is still highly regarded as the scariest game of all time. While that's debatable at this point, you can't argue that for its time, the game was genuinely gruesome. Characters are shown in horrifyingly mutilated ways, the dialogue is metaphorical but creepily interesting, and the storyline is as solid as the Great Wall of China. Jump scares feel like a bullet in the chest, and even if you've played the game multiple times like me, you'll find yourself feeling very uncomfortable. Your guard is teased constantly throughout the events of the game's story, which I should probably start with. So sit back, relax, and get ready, because this is my official long play and review of Outlast How I Remember It. You play as Miles Upshur, a journalist who's been hitting rock bottom in terms of his career. Desperate to find the story of a lifetime, he follows an email that was printed to him the night before from an anonymous whistleblower. The note states that there is an insane asylum owned and operated by Murkoff Corporation, a greedy and supposedly twisted company that has conducted all sorts of harmful crimes against humanity. With a story as big as this, it would be impossible to pass up. Imagine it, Miles Upshur, the man who cracked Mount Massive Asylum, a supposed charity center for the criminally insane. The game immediately offers us some text as a tutorial, giving us hints as to where we may have to go in the environment and to remind the player that their eyes should always be open. There's no means of attacking or defending yourself, so your eyes are your only weapon. We enter the asylum through the window, and so far things do seem weird. It's quiet, there's blood smeared in strange spots on the walls, and we get the strange feeling that we aren't alone. The claustrophobia and senses of danger work wonders in this game. Even in a static environment when the threat isn't there, the scenery is shocking with corpses hanging from the ceiling and heads resting along a cabinet like bottles at a bar. Oh shit, I almost forgot to mention, you might be wondering, how the fuck can I consider Miles to be one of the best characters in a horror game if he never speaks? Well, that's false. He speaks his mind through his journal, which he only writes stuff down if he films something important. Reading these notes gives you more of a personal look inside Miles' head, and everything he feels is authentic. I liked discovering all the different things he can talk about, and these notes push the story further as well. You're also encouraged to look for documents which are scattered throughout the Murkoff Asylum, giving insight behind famous characters you'll meet in a brief amount of time. Oh hey, I think I found the way to go!
Little pig.
I probably wouldn't get up from that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most horribly amazing introductions ever. Some giant fat fucking monstrosity threw us through the window, and it's a miracle that Miles can even walk. After awakening, we have to find a way to power up the main entrance doors. To do that, we have to head into the security office and hack into the console. Just then, that priest guy from before is seen on the monitor. He turns off the power. Hiding in the nearby locker is the only escape past the next threat. Chris Walker has become an iconic name in the horror genre. He's an ex-military veteran who has been turned into a nightmarish hellspawn, acting as some sort of security guard by hunting down anyone he believes is sick and ripping their goddamn heads off. The strategy to getting by him is simple. He's not too fast, so his strength can be outmatched by his speed. As long as you stay low, he won't see you, but the second you hear him running and breathing heavily, get your ass to a safe place fast. The sounds of his chains rattling and deep growls are enough to keep you awake at night. Besides him, you'll also have to face the other everyday grunts that chase after you. Of course, you'll encounter them for the first time in the basement after hiding in the locker. What you have to do is hit the 2 switches in the side rooms, then run into the far back room and flick the lever there, hide in the locker so that fuckface McGee here doesn't find you, then run back to the main room, hit the main console button, and run like hell back to the security office. What adds to the scare factor in Outlast is the simple idea that the answer is never spelled out. If you're a beginner, it'll probably take you a couple of tries to memorize the routes you have to take. However, once you're familiar with it and can figure out the complex puzzle while dodging death, you're good to go. Well, shit. It looks like that priest guy got to us first. His name turns out to be Father Martin, a deranged maniac who thinks he's the divine ruler of the asylum and that God asks him to spread his gospel like a plague. He's not necessarily a bad guy, he doesn't ever hurt Miles other than knocking him out with the same stuff Dexter Morgan uses, but he is a murderer, so I guess case in point. When we awaken, we find out we're safe for now. It seems Father Martin wants us to document whatever there is to find here and discover whatever story he's trying to pass around. Well, alright, let's head out. Oh, well, that's nice, you fucking slobs. Where are your goddamn clothes? These are the Naked Twins, known famously now for their unappealing and uncomfortable character designs. I mean, come on, they're fucking naked. Do I have to spell it out? And no, I'm not gonna zoom in on their dicks. I already did that the first time I played. In all seriousness, this is where we realize just how bad things are in this insane place. Residents have taken it upon themselves to headbutt the walls in anger. Some of them look like horrible burn victims that have never fully recovered. It's terrifying. Now keep in mind, there is no way to defend yourself. The only weapon you get is your camcorder, and without it, you'd be dead. Not only can it help you navigate the darkness, but you can also spy on an enemy from a distance by zooming in and out. You'll have to look around the environment for batteries, otherwise being stuck in the dark is a bitch. On most of the difficulties besides insane mode, you are allowed to be hit 3 times before you die, depending on who gets you. If it's Chris Walker, it's an instant death. If it's any other random psycho, usually you can get by without taking too much damage. The imagery in this game is just sadistic. It throws you into a situation that none of us could ever be prepared for. Miles wittingly states that death isn't the worst thing that could happen to him, and I mean, it's obvious. It's not. All throughout the facility, the words Walrider are sprawled in blood. Many of the other inmates mention the project that Dr. Wernicke, or Wernicke, I don't know how it's said, the founder of Murkoff, has been conducting even years after his announced death. I also have to mention this genius segment where you walk in the dark hallway and only have a moment to react after seeing that both of the Naked Twins have returned and cornered you. Jumping out of the window is the only option. The first time I played this part, I jumped out of my goddamn skin. This is definitely on the same ginormous scale as Resident Evil, and what amazes me is when the game was first announced, Red Barrels was simply a small indie company, but have since then transgressed into legendary territory. I think it's obvious that the second Outlast game wasn't nearly as good as the first, so I don't plan on mentioning it too much. The puzzles within the first game are very much reminiscent of classic horror games, involving some light backtracking and constant focus. To throw you off, there will be enemies during certain parts that will hunt you down, so this can make puzzle solving tricky. Next up, Miles has to navigate through the sewers and drain the water in order to access the showers. Chris Walker returns, but he's slower than my rat's ass. This is also where we start to see some moderate images in the camera, noises that seem to come out of nowhere, almost like whispers. The player questions their own sanity for a few minutes, and it's ironic due to the premise. It's not long before we inevitably end up having to run for our lives, escaping this band of idiots that scream obscenities at you. It's an intense moment, and suddenly we're cornered.
You're not one of them, are you? Quick, get in the dumbwaiter if you want to live.
You made the right choice here, buddy. You're the bullshit priest's guy, aren't you? His witness or whatever. You must be exhausted. Let's take a break, huh, buddy? The old 2-martini lunch? Have a little confab, blah, blah. Happier than you look. A little cardio wouldn't kill you. Okay, here we go, arms and legs inside the car at all times.
Dr. Richard Trager, possibly one of the most underrated villains in a horror game to date. He's gotta be. I mean, his character is just a whole new level of terrifying. Trager's personality as a doctor has carried over to whatever infected him from the morphogenic engine. No longer trying to save lives, he spends his days gathering new subjects to experiment with using torture and mutilation.
We're putting that tongue to any use anyway. Truth be told, I was just tired of licking my own stairs.
He's cocky, he's charming, and he's absolutely mad. It's funny that he asks if Miles needs a few minutes for a break, because that's exactly what this cutscene is meant to do, relax you momentarily. Sure, you're still seeing some gruesome stuff, but this is the intermission point where the rest of the game will prove to be even more of a challenge than before. So get this. Trager sets up our camera to film whatever he has planned for us, and then this.
And that's what I'm here for. To make you believe. You paying attention? Don't pass out on me. There's still a lot for you to absorb. There. Better, right?
The motherfucker took our fingers off. Now it's really time to book it out of here before he comes back and finishes the job. Making our way out, we can witness him murder yet another victim of his. Getting the key to the elevator is the only way out, and I'll admit, this part is really tricky. Trager's movement, unlike Chris Walker's or even the Wall Riders, is set to permanent puppy guard mode. At the end of this hallway, there's a door. It's blocked by a cabinet. You have to move the cabinet, but the second that you move it, it instantly triggers the doctor, which makes it a very close call. I mean, Jesus, does he have to stand right next to the fucking thing?
Aren't you a slippy little fucker?
Why can't I run? I couldn't run. I tried to fucking sprint and it wouldn't let me. Anyways, you grab the key, you pull a quick sprint to the door, and finally you're in the elevator. You enjoy a nice cup of Traeger juice, and then it's on to the outside area. There's not much to say here besides make sure you have plenty of batteries. If you thought it was dark inside Mount Massive, oh boy, just wait till you get to the courtyard. It's like wearing a blindfold without the night vision on. Soon afterwards, we have to find the theater key in order to catch up with Father Martin on the next floor. I liked this part in particular because it reveals a lot of information behind Dr. Wernicke's experiment and how he thought playing God was the right thing to do. Utilizing the mind of an insane person for any monetary reason is never really an Einstein move, if you ask me. Anyways, you get the key, you sneak past the fucking naked Nancys, and finally you're about to reunite with Father Martin. Oh my god, it's him again. Jesus Christ. They really don't want you to be able to escape from Chris Walker. I actually like how you can never truly feel safe so long as he is still around. He's unpredictable and unstable, to say the least. So we finally arrive to the chapel, where Father Martin has taken it upon himself to reenact some sort of religious sacrifice that Miles must document and share with the world. A goosebump-inducing scene, I must say.
You will watch and recall my death, my resurrection. And together we will be free.
Now we have a way out. The front doors. The one place we've been fighting so hard to get to. The outside world. It's finally here. Oh, I guess not. Yeah, it's not looking good for Miles anymore. This late into the game and suddenly we're thrown even further down the rabbit hole, quite literally. It begins when we start roaming the underground labs, and then he appears. The Wall Rider, Billy Hope himself. After running back, we discover that Dr. Wernicke is still alive. Plot twist. So now, we're given this seemingly impossible task. Kill Billy Hope. Miles has seen hell, along with its ugly 9 circles. He's escaped the worst of fates by mere inches, and now he has to end it all. Live or die. What a fucking hero. This part's all about staying ahead of Billy. If you let him catch up, he'll explode you from the inside out. It's not exactly the most heartwarming way to die. After disabling Billy's main power and life support, Miles is tossed around like a ragdoll, screaming out in agony as the Wall Rider suddenly vanishes. Miles makes a desperate effort to escape, only to discover just about what I would have expected.
You have become the host.
And with that, I can officially say that this game's story is fucking fantastic. The grotesque imagery, the shuddering sounds, the surprising amount of good jump scares. It's a cult classic and should still be revered as one today. But we're not finished yet. As with every great story told in life, there are two sides. Remember the letter that Miles received from the Whistleblower in the beginning? Yeah, the devs made a DLC not long after the game's overwhelmingly positive feedback involving the man behind Miles' visit to Mount Massive in the first place. Wayland Park is another great character without a voice or a face. Right in the beginning, we see the letter he sends out to Miles when suddenly he's interrupted. I enjoy watching the chaos ensue from behind the office glass. The workers and victims of this STEM system are all in disarray, and it doesn't even look human. Not to mention this asshole in the jumpsuit who constantly speaks to Wayland like he's a 5-year-old toddler.
No, I don't need another performance evaluation. Mr. Park here is gonna have us up and running before we even know it. Right, Mr. Park? You're doubting our friend, Mr. Wayland Park? Which I consider more than unkind to his programming skill and considerable dedication to the Murkoff Corporation.
Hey, calm yourself. This is a high security...
It's all right, Agent. Mr. Park was just surprised. I'm sure he's still calm and eager to finish his work. Take your seat. You're finished, Mr. Wayland Park. You can leave. Don't expect anything but honesty in my review of your performance.
It doesn't take a genius to find out that Wayland has been compromised by Jeremy Blair, the head of security for the Murkoff Corporation. After getting caught, Wayland is placed directly in the morphogenic program and only just barely escapes. He grabs the camcorder, and his journey begins. Much like the main story, Whistleblower offers a new crazy cast of schizos with their own unique and deranged personalities. You have the buzzsaw guy, Frank Manera, who eats corpses and falls in love with them. You have the one guy in the cluttered rooms who holds 3 separate personalities in the same body named Menace. Chris Walker makes a small cameo from time to time. And then we have Eddie Gluskin, the freaky fuck who's looking for the perfect woman. Some of the more iconic scenes from the DLC happen pretty early on. I liked seeing the facility from a different perspective, and being there when the shit hits the fan makes the gameplay all the more intense. Like these inmates who stab a poor doctor to death and then they all ominously stare at you. Little touches like this are what makes Outlast so special. The horror in this game couldn't possibly be matched. Wayland eventually figures out by eavesdropping on the guards that he can use the shortwave radio inside the asylum to call for help. There's still a bit of light at the end of our tunnel after all, until we start hearing the buzzsaw in the distance.
Don't you look at us. I love you.
Yeah, this is Frank Manera, in other words, fucking Leatherface. No, he doesn't wear faces of other people, but he certainly does have a thing for dead bodies, which is just straight up disgusting. He's the first major variant Wayland faces, and normally he's not too hard so long as the game doesn't spawn him right in front of you. Don't! Ah! Yeah, like that. What the fuck? At least let me try to get away, you fucking necrophiliac. He throws you into an incinerator with the hopes of burning you alive. He's constantly yelling and revving up the buzzsaw just to intimidate you. Man, why the hell are you chasing me this much? I just witnessed you explode some poor fucker's head into oblivion, and didn't you say you loved him? Well, if that's love, I guess I'm really happy to be full of hate. In order to get outside to find the radio, Wayland must first disable the gas in the decontamination room. This part isn't tricky so long as you know where Frank will spawn, and you can easily bypass any danger if you're quick. Might I also add that this game's soundtrack is just fucking fantastic? For an indie game, you'd think they hired Danny Elfman or some shit. Obviously, some of the sounds are royalty-free, but I don't think that matters here. If anything, it just goes to show you can make something generic sound very scary. It's all in the presentation. But besides the music, you have the sound design, and it's phenomenal. The guy who smacks his head against the concrete pillars in the main game made me wince, and when this asshole named Andrew licks our ear in the beginning of Whistleblower, it actually sounds like someone's doing that. After bypassing Frank Manera for the final time, we make our way outside where things haven't really gotten much better. The air is filled with a thick cloud of fog, so night vision is useless for this segment. This is where your skills will be put to the ultimate test, constantly throwing curveballs in Wayland's direction. He runs into the naked twins, then a bunch of assholes playing basketball with a decapitated head. I liked this segment because of how difficult it is to see, and the constant changes the game brings to throw you off. Dead ends, empty rooms, all that sort of stuff. Finally, we made it to the radio room. Now it's time to call for help and get some backup. Yeah, this is the best part of the game. What happens is, Wayland calls in the big dogs, and a helicopter shows up gunning down all of the variants. Chris Walker takes a massive shit in the parking lot, and Wayland lives to go home in time to kiss his wife goodnight. Except I lied. None of that happens, but it would have been fucking funny if it did. What actually happens is, Jeremy Blair shows up and destroys the goddamn thing. Jesus, thanks, man. You've officially doomed everyone else here. This is when Chris Walker returns, but he's super easy to bypass. After this, we're back outside again on the opposite end of the courtyard. This part is slightly annoying because you have to run back and forth twice in a row. Once to turn off the electrical fence, and twice to do it again because some goofy goober thinks it's hilarious to fuck with us. There's actually something really cool here that I never noticed before. You can see Eddie Gluskin just before you meet him. Just walk up to these double doors and he'll scoot right by. I'll talk about Eddie Gluskin later because there's another threat we face just before getting to him. Escaping by mere inches, Waylon ends up climbing a watchtower and crossing over to the adjacent building, but the ceiling collapses beneath him. Holy shit, what a fucking fall. I don't think I'd be getting up after that, but that's why we love Waylon. He's a fucking maniac. This is when we're introduced to Dennis, a schizophrenic man who believes he has 3 separate personalities inside of him, but doesn't realize he's just talking out loud to himself.
What in creation are you talking about? He just likes to hear himself talk. We need to go to his reason. Ah! Kill the rats! He's here! Inside the walls! Kill him! I wanna shut him up. Water and time. Drill a hole in anything. The hell I hear things, Paw. The lot of you may as well be a pile of whelped possum. Tiny, pink, and deaf and blind. Go find yourself a possum titty.
Honestly, he's not very talked about in terms of reactions from players, but I thought it was a genius idea. A crazed man who spouts nonsensical words and phrases, altering his voice to different pitches in order to simulate an entirely different personality? That's terrifying. Kinda reminds me of the movie Split, so I guess I'll just have to watch that. It also reminds me of Jack Baker from Resident Evil 7 because Dennis, while terrifying, is also very comedic. Half of the things he says to himself are heavily underrated in my opinion. Just when you think we're in the clear, it's never as it seems. Dennis says that we delivered ourselves into Gluskin's hell. Who the fuck is... Oh, wait! The guy from the introduction of the game. The one who banged on the glass and begged for us to save him? That's Eddie Gluskin? Well, this is awkward to say the least.
Die.
He's one of the scariest guys ever invented in a horror game. Eddie Gluskin's whole persona is that of a Reddit user who constantly begs for a crumb of pussy, only Gluskin doesn't beg, he takes, by force. He's a deluded mental case and he only wants to kill people to turn them into horrific dioramas like this one. Yeah, I'm obviously gonna censor some of it because even to this day it's pretty disgusting, but if you know, you know. Getting by him is not as easy as the others. He moves slowly, but it's at this segment that Waylon takes a nasty fall and hurts his leg. You're no longer allowed to sprint, but instead are stuck with this pathetic limp. A huge switch up for the gameplay. Waylon ends up cornered, where he can only do the one thing he knows how to: hide. This is a trap, however, as Eddie locks us inside and takes us to his dungeon. This is where we bear witness to some of the worst imagery ever portrayed in a horror game. Gluskin tortures his victims to death in hopes that he can bring out beauty in them, turn them into women, and make them obey and love him. But it's nothing more than a sadistic excuse to express his childhood trauma. What an excellent villain, honestly. Kudos to the guy who voiced him. I hated every second of being locked in his domain. Suddenly, we're on the operating table, and it looks like we're about to be split in two. What the hell even is this wooden piece of shit? It looks like something Art the Clown would have cocked up. Don't ask. If you want to know what I'm referencing, watch the first Terrifier movie. You'll understand before too long. Almost like Jesus Christ himself, some random guy pops out of the darkness and punches Eddie Gluskin. Now, hear me out. I have a small little idea that I just thought would have been cool, and I wanted to share with you guys. How cool would it have been if they incorporated both Miles and Waylon in this same area? Sure, their storylines would be different along with their escape routes, but wouldn't it have been kinda cool to discover that Miles was the one who punched Eddie in order to save Waylon? Even if it was unintentional, I think that would have worked, and imagine you see Miles' perspective when Gluskin starts running after you. I don't know. I thought that would have been pretty fucking sweet. Editor's note, I am now realizing how stupid that sounds, considering if Miles was seen punching an enemy, that would ruin the whole purpose of running away and hiding the entire time. So, yeah, scratch that. But enough of my fantasies. It's time to get the fuck away. We end up hurling out of a window and still find ourselves within reach of Eddie. There's only one door left to unlock, and once we get the key, it's a literal fight for our lives.
One more. I tried, and I tried. You all betrayed me. Hold still. God damn it, what are you? Ah! No, damn it, darling. No, you need to behave. We could have been beautiful.
And just like that, Eddie Gluskin is dead. Thank fuck. I like how Wayland writes in his notes that he tried not to laugh after the perverted son of a bitch went belly up. At this point, who knows who is crazy anymore. With him out of the way, it's time to limp our way out of here. Out of the asylum, back home to safety. On our way out, we see an injured Jeremy Blair.
Fucking die! No one can know! No one! Oh God! Oh Christ in heaven! How to get out? No! No! No, please! No! No!
There's no ending quite like this in a horror game, at least not to me. Wayland makes a sluggish attempt to run for the gate when he sees a Jeep belonging to none other than Miles Upshur. He takes the car but has one last look at the wall rider. The new host, Miles, stares at him intimidatingly from a distance. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the full story of Outlast and its outstanding DLC, both of which have proven to be timeless classics that will forever hold a place in my heart. This is something I've genuinely been excited to talk about, considering Outlast was a huge influence for me to make my own kinds of spooky, scary camcorder footage. The developers knew how to freak us out back then, and anybody who has somehow never experienced this game is in for a treat. But that'd be if the treat was just frozen dog shit placed in an ice cream container. You're not going to want to go into it unprepared, and that's what I love about it. I love how Miles doesn't say a goddamn word and yet you feel like you are him the entire time. The same goes for Wayland. If you ask me, I'd say they belong on the same pedestal as Isaac Clarke from 2008's Dead Space and even Gordon Freeman. The variants are all scary and it's cool that each encounter is different. Sure, it's mostly running and hiding, but I'd like to think that if they gave you multiple chances to defend yourself, the game wouldn't have been as well received. People like Richard Trager, Chris Walker, Eddie Gluskin, Dennis the fucking Menace are all prime examples of realistic and scary villains that have forever cast a shadow in anything else the series has to offer thus far. Outlast is unmatched with its horror, brutality, scenery, graphics, characters, lighting, sound. It is one of the greatest games ever made. I always dive back in every few months or so just to get a taste of how these devs truly cared for their game and gave it proper treatment. It's a classic. I'm really excited to see the Outlast trials, but I am a tad bit nervous. The sequel wasn't really up to par with the first game, giving mixed results and a fucked up ending that leaves more questions than answers. But that's a discussion for another time, as I'm done for the day. Thank you again for watching, guys. Stay tuned and I'll see you next time when I discuss my other favorite games of all time, the ones I forgot to mention. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our channel, and thanks for checking out this video. Leave a like, comment, and since we're on the subject, enjoy yourself. Thanks for watching the content, folks.